In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency.
I am so excited to speak with today's guest. He has bootstrapped and grown an impressive and unique company in the cybersecurity space, up to 20 million in ARR, and he is loaded with thoughtful leadership perspectives that we'll dive into today. His company has been named Best Places to Work, twice by Consulting Magazine and 6 times in Atlanta's Best Places to Work, as well as being nominated in the top 40 most innovative companies in Georgia. His firm has performed well over 1,000 cybersecurity compliance and GRC projects, and he's the author of a brand new book, The Security Team Operating System. He delivers over 24 keynotes per year and sits on a number of advisory boards. He is the founder and CEO of Risk 360. Christian Hyatt, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Natalie. I feel like you make me sound way cooler than I am with the intro, so thank you so much.
Very well deserved. Christian, there is a lot that I want to cover with you, so I'd love to jump right in. And my first question for you is, what is the biggest misconception out there about driving major change in an organization?
I was thinking about that question, and I think that the biggest misconception is that, from my experience, people tend to rush into organizational change because something hurts and they want to fix that, rather than stopping and being patient and thinking about the purpose of clarity. So a good example of that I see often is, let's say an organization has a department that is not performing well. And so what I'll see organizations tend to do is they launch a big initiative because they want to reorg the department or they want to do something to make them perform well, and they get going, but they didn't stop and think about the true objectives. So one of the frameworks that we commonly use here at Risk 360 and that we coach our clients to use is this 3-step framework to define a problem. And we've seen that be very impactful. So the framework is, first, clearly define the problem statement in writing. And that seems obvious, but what I've seen when working with organizations is that a lot of people aren't clear about the problem, and there isn't a shared understanding of the problem. You have different stakeholders who want to solve different things, but by slowing down and really documenting the problem and then having it up on the screen and everyone looking at that together, there's some power in the bond of joint discovery where everyone says, yes, that is the problem. That's well articulated. That's what we want to solve. So that's step one. The second step that we do is to define the future state. So you have this problem, but where do you want to go? And that is also interesting because people have different ideas about what the bright, shiny new future might look like. Sometimes it's very individual. Sometimes it's aligned to a business objective. Sometimes it's something different entirely. But you have that second bond of joint discovery with a team where they're like, yes, this is the problem. This is the desired future state. All the stakeholders are on the same page about what they can accomplish, what they can't accomplish. And then the third step to that is like, what's the journey to that future state? What's the 4-step process to get there? And we've taken literally hundreds of clients through that exact process for cybersecurity transformations and our own company through that process. And it's just amazing what you discover, the new people that have to enter the conversation to actually solve a problem, and sometimes just abandoning trying to solve it. Because once you define it really well, you realize that it's outside of your power or it's not worth the energy to solve. And just that patience to get clear is a huge, huge value to driving organizational change from my experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting and very kind of concrete advice there. I'm curious. So I want to come back to some of these areas, but back to companies rushing into change. Like, why do you think that happened? Where does it come from?
I mean, I think it comes from us being like high performers and wanting results fast. Because usually the people driving change are like doers, like get it done type of people. I'm the world's worst about this. I started a company. I want results quickly. I have a bright idea that pops into my head and I want to go get it. And so I'll share this idea with people. And when you're a leader and you share an idea, that tends to mobilize people. People take that as a mandate rather than an idea, and people get going to solve a problem. Where as a leader, what I found that I have to do is like simmer on that problem for a while, sit on it, be quiet about it, be patient, and clarify it and socialize it. And then if it still matters to me over time, then bring that to the organization and drive the change. So I think this is like one of those instances where the best intent gets us in a little bit of trouble because it's people wanting to solve a problem. They really want to do the right thing. They're energetic. They're excited to get started. But what you have to do is be patient and think this stuff out. That's been my experience at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, personally, I can empathize with that. And I think I've learned, for myself, I need to articulate, here's an idea. There might be nothing there, or I'm not suggesting you jump into this, but right. It's just an idea. It's just a concept, food for thought.
Yeah.
I think the way you just said that, right, it tends to mobilize people when you're not quite at that stage yet, being
Yeah.
clear around kind of who are you, kind of the leader in your thinking around that.
One of the things that we did that might be helpful is we're a pretty small organization, but even us, we instituted this thing called the Initiative Review Board. And it's a very simple process, but the bottom line is you have to submit basically a one slide pitch for a new initiative that you want to get off the ground. And the reason we did that is because we had this huge backlog of ideas, things people wanted to do, but there was no formal place to approve those things. But what I found was when someone brings me an idea, if I say simply, hey, that's an IRB, bring that to the initiative review board, put it in the template, probably 95% of the ideas die because people realize that they don't, it's not important enough for them to take the time to think through it, or through the process of actually documenting the business case and the problem, they realize, oh, this isn't that good of an idea. So there's some real power in just like slowing down and thinking through something sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, do you do anything to solicit ideas or kind of encourage people to solicit ideas, or does it just happen more organically and you are really looking for the right kind of framework to encourage that or support it?
I mean, funny enough, I think we are blessed in the sense that with our clients as well as at Risk 360, like there's no shortage of our ideas. Our issue isn't great ideas, is actually saying no to good ideas. Because we're in a position where we're not saying like there's no bad ideas anymore. Like we've kind of shortlisted those. There's only good ideas and great ideas. So it's really painful. Like when you're presented multiple really good ideas that all have positive return on investment, but you can only do one or two of them. You have to shortlist that. That it's easy to. Someone told me once it's really easy to say no to a bad idea. It's really hard to say no to a good idea, and that's where we're at. I think once an organization gets really large, you can maybe do hackathons or something to like encourage people to bring ideas. But we mostly work with B2B tech companies, and these companies, even the larger ones, have no shortage of good ideas. It's really like creating that framework to action the good ideas.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really good advice. I'm curious, Christian, some of what you shared in that kind of three-step framework. You talked about, defining the problem in writing, and just kind of going through the process. I'm curious, like you talked about kind of everyone looking at it together. Like, is that truly kind of the whole organization? Are there certain kind of segments of your team? Like, how do you do that? How do you think about it?
Usually is so what typically happens is there's someone who brings the problem to the table, like a sponsor. So there's a champion, someone who's at the right level of the organization, typically an executive that has sensed that there is a problem, so they come to us with that problem. That's both internally and with our clients. And then as we kind of work through that problem and start defining it, what I have seen happen is that is when additional people are brought into the meeting. Our chief revenue officer has this saying that is one of my favorite sayings. He told me when he first joined that you're routed to the person you sound like. So if you are asking questions that only the CEO can answer, well, you get routed to the CEO. So if you're very business objective oriented, you're asking smart questions, you'll get routed to the right people. And from my experience, by defining the problem really clearly and asking why a lot and getting clear on how this adds value to the business and what you're trying to accomplish, over time, you suddenly get the perfect audience to solve that problem. So it's definitely not the whole organization. It's really bespoke to that specific problem and being curious enough to uncover like who actually needs to be involved to make this decision and to get this off the ground, whether it's internal or whether it's with the client. And that's how we've typically approached it.
Mhm. I like that, and I have not heard something like that, about kind of routing to the person you sound like. I think that's spot on. I wrote that down in my notes because I think that's a really good one, so it'll
Yeah.
definitely stick with me. Yeah. Into your kind of second step around kind of defining the future state, curious, like, how concretely do you define that? Like, how much research goes into it, versus just kind of the experience that the team already has? Want to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we kind of keep that business objective focus. And what I mean by that is the tendency when we do this exercise with people is they think about like the activities that the future state will look like. Like I'll be doing this in the future state. And I always advise people, I say, I don't care what you'll be doing. I don't care about the activities. What's different about the business? Like, for example, is it better prepared to scale? Is it more profitable? Have you reduced costs? Like, what's the key outcome for the business in that future state that you're looking for? And staying really focused on that. Because I have this problem and I have this future outlook that needs to be tied to business objectives. And if I frame it that way, then the next step when you start talking about the solutions, it really helps out. So to give you a concrete example, a lot of our clients are way overburdened with compliance, like cybersecurity compliance in particular. So they'll come to us and they might say, it's really burdensome and demotivates the team, and we all hate dealing with it. And I'll say, great. Well, what's the real problem? Are you losing customers? Are you being regulated against? Like, what's going on that the business cares? All right, ma'am, we'll define the problem. And they'll say, well, where do you want to get to? And they'll say, "Well, I just want to do less audits. I want to do less compliance." And I'll say, "Well, really, or what's the real business objective?" Okay, our objective is to reduce costs and reduce the effort and the manpower and the number of hours we're spending on doing audits. Great. You have this problem. You want to reduce the costs and the effort. Well, there's 1,000 ways to slice that. Let's get creative and figure out like the best path to meeting that objective. And that kind of opens the door to some creativity and to really thinking deeply about how you achieve that objective rather than defining the objective as like a project or like some kind of putting it in a box of how you might solve it. So that's how we've kind of worked through problem future state.
Okay. And then what about kind of the journey or the solutions? How do you document that? How do you adjust for things that change in real time? And kind of sometimes you can have the best laid plans, but then kind of life happens or the market is responding a certain way. And you navigate that.
Yeah, I usually break things up into phases. So my rule of thumb is everything is 3 to 5 steps. Like I try to boil everything up. That I think it's easy to talk about in that way. So those steps often vary, but the one common thing is the first step. I always call shared vision and clarity because pretty much every project that you intake involves a couple things. It involves shared problem statement, shared future statement, a stakeholder inventory, a buy-in on the outcomes, meeting rhythms and communication cadences, probably some discovery so you can understand the organization. So that step pretty much always remains intact, regardless of the project. And then the next steps I often arrive at with the team. Like, all right, what's the best first step? Because the best first step's usually most clear. So we'll do all that discovery. What's next? And then nail that down. And then it gets more murky the further you get out into the project timeline or the steps. So those we even mark often in our project plans. Like we don't know what this looks like yet, but we think it might look like this. And as we approach those milestones, they get more and more clear.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds spot on, and I think aligns with some other conversations I've had where really making sure at the outset you've got the alignment, you've got the communications to the various kind of people within the organization or any kind of other stakeholders, and then go kind of inverted pyramid from knowing kind of what's immediately in front of you, and then leaving enough room to adjust, as you say, the things that are not as defined, and you need to let the process unfold a bit more organically.
Yeah, one of my go-to statements when I'm like having a call with people and trying if it's my job to drive the initiative, I'll usually ask, what's the best next step? Like the immediate thing we can do right now after this call. Like is it set up another call? Is it, accomplish something between meetings? And that kind of shifts gears. I have found that that's a good way for people to shift gears from this big picture of what we're trying to achieve to like, how do we actually get some traction on the project? Because as an executive, that's like one of the most difficult things is having this big picture perspective, but also keeping in mind how you tactically make traction on the project. So asking that question sometimes helps spur the conversation.
Right, right. Always moving one step forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you clearly have a lot of hands-on experience here. I'd love to talk a little bit more about kind of changes that you've driven, and maybe you have an example of kind of what's the biggest or one of the biggest changes that you've driven in an organization.
Yeah. We've probably driven bigger changes for some of our clients than ourselves, but I think a helpful story is to talk about like a failure we've had in driving organizational change. So we'll talk a little bit more about Risk 360, I'm sure. But one of the things we do is we do cybersecurity consulting, but we also have a SaaS platform. And when I started the business, we started out doing consulting, but I always had this dream of building the platform that could solve this really important problem that we want to solve. But I grew up in consulting with no background in product or or how to build them or how to bring them to market or anything like that. So we were doing an annual offsite meeting uh, with with our whole team, which we do each year. And our engineering team was at a table, our CTO and our engineering team, and we had a whole lot of energy as a firm to bring this product that we were so proud of to the market, but no plans on how to actually do that. So for some reason, I had this wild idea. I was like, let's just give it away for free and maybe people will pay us for it once they realize the value. I didn't have the word to so what that's called is product-led growth, a freemium model. I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know that term when I said this, but I walked up to him and I was like, "Let's give it away for free. It's so good, people will sign up and then they'll become paying customers. That's what will happen." So we did that. We introduced the freemium model. We came up with some great marketing plans to let people know that that product existed. The first day that we released it, we had almost 1,000 signups for the product itself. Felt like a huge success. But I think out of those 1,000 signups, we had like 10 people log into the platform. It wasn't that bad, but pretty bad. It was like a very low percentage of people who even logged in. I think we got one paying customer out of it over the course of the year that we did this. And it was hugely demotivating for the team. And it sent us on this wild goose chase of like, what is this product? We had a team meeting, and that's the exact thing, like what I was talking about earlier. Like the pain that we felt was we wanted to sell this product, so we rushed into a solution without really like thinking about it more than we should have, which sometimes works out. In this instance, it did not. Uh, what we learned along the way was that Full Circle, which is a GRC platform, it solves a very complex problem for complex organizations that does not lend itself to a freemium model. There's too much risk on the line. It requires an implementation. You have to help step people through how to use the platform. Our all the intellectual horsepower that we have built up as a firm over the years lends itself to solving complex problems, not simple problems. And I feel like if we would have stopped and kind of done the three-step framework that I said and really thought through that problem, it would have become obvious to us that that's what we needed to do. But just because we had such energy and enthusiasm, we went down this crazy track for almost a full year and failed pretty miserably. We didn't sign up as near as many customers as we wanted. We actually pivoted the next year and took a much more deliberate approach, defined our ideal client profile, talked to a bunch of customers about the problem that we're solving for them, where we were having success, went to market in a different way, changed our product roadmap, did a lot of different things. And then our first year, we sold our first $1 million of product of the SaaS platform, which was a huge success for us to break that barrier. But the bottom line on that is that was the classic example of us not stopping and thinking, wasting a lot of energy instead of using a framework and being patient and being clear about who we were serving and how we were serving them. And it cost us. We learned a lot, so it wasn't a complete loss. But I wish we would have done that differently. And I think we learned the hard way. That's the wrong way to do organizational change. It's called bumping your head and then learning from that. But it turned out to be one of our biggest successes. And I think now we have more clarity than ever about who we serve, how we serve them, the value that we add to them. how to bring this product to market, how to implement it for our customers and the value that they get out of it, how to support them. So it ended up being a huge change. So that's an example of what not to do. Think twice. Don't bring a product to market like we did. But I think it's very common in the startup world. And I see a lot of big companies making the same type of mistake.
Yeah, I think it points back to what you were sharing earlier about kind of you have a great idea, you want to kind of rush to get it to market and kind of see the traction from it. Uh, and it's hard to kind of stop, pause, do
Yes.
that market analysis as you were talking, right? Look at kind of what's happening in that competitive landscape. Who's our ideal
Yeah.
client for this? Is it any different than our kind of core offering, competitive landscape, all of that?
It's funny too. We've done a lesson. We've thought about this a lot as a team. We laugh about it now. Um, it's pretty much all the same team members too, that are doing what we did now versus what we did then. And one of the funniest things is like it really was that rash. I just walked up to the table and I was like, "Let's do this," and no one disagreed. Like even like these are experienced people. Our CTO has he was hire number 4 at SecureWorks, which is a really huge cybersecurity company. He's worked at lots of very successful $100 million companies and helped scale them. So he's a guy who knows like how to do this the right way. But we were so with the best intentions. We wanted to move fast. We had this great idea. We had conviction. There was energy attached to it, and we just went off in this wrong direction. And it's kind of funny, like we were all like we shared this delusion almost in the moment that was totally irrational. If I really stop and think about it. Um, but that is the same thing that I see happening to so many organizations. They let their zeal, their energy, their desire to solve this pain quickly overcome the logic of taking a pragmatic, clear, patient approach. So when I see that happening in our own organization or with any of our clients or colleagues, I'll kind of give them that cautionary tale about how we wasted a lot of time bringing a product to market.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would be great if we could learn always only from other people's mistakes, but I think the reality is sometimes we learn best from our own. And then the key is to get kind of better and make changes as a result, which sounds
Yeah,
like worked really well for you guys.
definitely.
Yeah. I do think there's also, cultural shift that sometimes is needed in going from like pure services to also having a SaaS product and thinking of like how you bring it to market or the team or things like that. It sounds like you had the same team in place. Were there other changes that you needed to think about when you kind of reset and kind of launched the second time around?
Yeah, yes. So even before I started a business, I have always heard of the phenomena of like the friction between having a services business and having a product business. And I expected that with their own business. Like I knew that that was a thing, but I didn't know like how does that actually work? Like what is different about those businesses that functionally make that difficult? And some of the things that make that difficult is simple things like how you pay people, like incentive structures for product versus incentive structures for consulting services are totally different. Organizational structure when you're building a practice to deliver a service versus building an engineering team are totally different. Clarity in your go to market. So, do your customers think that you deliver a service or do you have a platform? All of that is very different. So, it muddies the waters in terms of your messaging and it makes it very difficult to bring that to market. It's also different culturally because are you building an engineering culture or are you building a consulting culture? And those are different cultures. Ironically, I didn't know this existed, but where we have landed is we're actually a tech enabled service, which is a thing. There's lots of companies that do that. But the secret sauce of our organization is to really implement our GRC platform is you need a team that's really good on strategy. You need the platform that supports the strategy. You need to implement the platform successfully. And then often you need support services to do some of the work streams afterwards. And when we kind of surveilled the marketplace, we saw a lot of consulting companies where they were having trouble because they didn't have the platform. We saw a lot of platform companies where they were struggling because they couldn't actually implement the platform or didn't have the strategy to solve the client's real problem. And when you combine those things, we found that that was like actually our secret sauce. So we go into these large Fortune 100 companies that have multiple products, multiple frameworks, tons of complexity related to cybersecurity. And because we have the people to do and think, we have the platform to support it. It's a very unique offering. But if you would have asked me, 10 years ago, what kind of company I would have built, I would have said either consulting or product where I didn't even know about the tech enabled service and the culture that comes along with that. So now we're kind of forging our middle ground path of this tech enabled service company.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really insightful. And I think there are those different flavors of how a services firm can introduce a new product. I mean, we've worked with, probably 12, 15 clients that have been through that kind of transition. And sometimes it is, like you say, tech enabled service. Sometimes it's in support of driving more services. Other times it becomes a spinoff and it starts as part of the organization and then becomes its own kind of entity. Um,
Yeah.
you don't always know going in, but it's helpful to kind of think through the different permutations and
I
what
mean,
makes sense for you.
yeah, the other hard thing is like we bootstrapped our company. So the way that we got off the ground was doing consulting work because there's very little cost associated with doing consulting work and you can make decent profits if you're good at it. So we hung on to the pride of being great consultants for a long time, just mentally, not even aware of that pride. So when we started bringing this product to market, shifting our thinking of Risk 360 as this great consulting company to Risk 360 as this tech enabled company was like a really subtle psychological shift, even for myself, that we had to like step the whole team through. Whereas historically, they might have branded themselves as great consultants, but now they're branding themselves as an employee of this great company who solves this really important problem for a customer. And it's just a weird mindset shift
Yeah.
that took a lot more like internal discovery than I anticipated.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you speak to how that happened?
Yeah, so I'm kind of a sloganeer. When you're a small startup CEO, one of the things that I have found is fairly effective at getting people's energy harnessed in a certain way and like getting everybody rowing in the same direction is like come up with a thing and then get everyone thinking about that thing. Let me give you an example. So one of the things we did is one of our core values is craftsmanship. And because we were a small company and we need to somehow punch above our weight. So we don't compete with other small companies. We compete with the big four. We compete with Accenture, these big prestigious consulting firms. So we were like, you know what? We're craftsmen and we're an elite boutique. That's the words we would use internally. So for several years, people clung on to that and that pride of becoming a craftsman, being an excellent consultant, being an elite boutique. And that became an important piece of our identity internally and to the marketplace. As we built this product, it became far less about an individual's ability to be a great consultant. And it became a lot more about how great our product is, our delivery processes, the full circle product itself, the problem that we're solving for the customer. So we had to somehow shift it from being about you are a great consultant to we solve a really important process. So we changed our words a little bit. We still have the same values and we still value people being craftsmen, but we started instead of being consultants, we said, "Hey, let's focus on the elite fundamentals." And so what are the elite fundamentals? For us, those are our world-class processes. So if you want to solve that multi-framework problem I'm talking about, if you want to implement full circle, well, we have our four-step process with great documentation and templates on how to do it. And everybody is trained on the elite fundamentals. So now our team defines themselves as taking pride in executing the elite fundamentals while also being a great consultant. So like that's a small tactical change that we did internally, just changed our vocabulary, changed our focus, changed our training plans a little bit so that the team kind of understood our intent and the outcome of being a great consultant versus having a great product and a great delivery process.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great. I'd love to, fast forward a little bit and talk about present day and ask you, what's the biggest challenge or priority in the business that you personally are focused on at the moment?
Yeah, so I do this. I try to take some time periodically, at least quarterly. I do kind of some annual planning. Then quarterly, I'll revisit the plan, and I'm talking about my personal plan. We also do this as a company, but it's my job changes so much. When I first started the business, I was delivering all the work. So I was a consultant that happened to own the company. Then I became basically a manager who happened to own a company. Now I'm kind of entering the territory of like I would say quote unquote real CEO where I have to lead through people. I have to carefully manage my time and energy. So on a quarterly basis, I'll kind of step back and I'll take an inventory of like where should I be spending my time? And I've come up with about six things that I think at my stage a CEO should do. And hope this is helpful to others, because that's always a question. Like, what does a CEO do? What should I be doing? Because it's so easy to get pulled into 1,000 projects. I would say number one is table stakes. That's product market fit. Like, if you don't have product market fit, you should probably just stop working on everything else and just figure that out, because you don't have a company if you don't have product market fit. And that is an ongoing process. That's not a one-time process and you're done, because your marketplace changes. So you always have to have product market fit. So I spend a lot of time with my team thinking about product market fit. The next thing that I spend a lot of time on is hiring and managing my leaders. So we do have an executive leadership team. I'm very fortunate. I've basically hired people who are all better than me. If you look at our executive, our ELT is what we call it. Our chief revenue officer was hire number 18 at one of the biggest players in our space. Our CTO, I talked about him a little bit. He's been at several very, very successful startups that became enterprise companies. Our chief people officer was a consultant to generals. She's a West Point graduate, an Army officer. She was a major in the Army, so on and so forth. So you can go down the list, just incredible people. So I spent a lot of time hiring and finding those people. Now I spend a lot of time making sure they're rowing in the same direction, being clear, establishing intent, and hoping to lead through them. So, I always need to be spending more time with them. The next thing is mission to metrics. So we use this framework where we look out 5 years. It's called a BHAG. I stole that from Vern Orange's book, Scaling Up. So where are we trying to get to in 5 years? And it takes courage to tell your whole team that this is the revenue, this is the future of the company, this is what it's going to look like, but it's a target. Then we break that out into annual goals. So for this year, we have a 2024 goal. And then I have to break that out by department. So how does each group, what are the key objectives and KPIs that they need to do to help hit the big picture goal where we're trying to go, and then hold them all accountable. And I check on that a whole lot. Number 4 is culture and values. So we have defined core values. We hire by those values. We do performance reviews twice a year. The core values are embedded in them. And most importantly, I have to lead by example and hold people accountable to those values and make clear my expectations. Almost done. Number 5 is brand equity. So where we're at as a business, I'm one, if you're an owner of a company, if you're a CEO, especially if you're an owner, you might be the only person in your organization that's authorized to speak on behalf of the company. So anything I say isn't Christian Hyatt speaking. I'm speaking for Risk 360 at this stage. So I need to build brand equity. I need to tell people that we exist and the problem that we can solve. So I'll do podcasts like this. I do 24 speaking events a year. A lot of founder-led marketing. So that's a really important part of what we do, although we do have a whole marketing team that's building a great brand outside of the efforts that I do. And then the last thing that is new, this is a new focus for me, is I've started to think about business as a really complex math equation. And what I mean by that is there's a set of variables that only the leadership team can decide on. So one of the most important variables is, what is the balance between profit and growth? Because growth requires cash. If you spend money on growth, you're probably reducing your profit. And really, as an owner and as a CEO of your business, you're the only one authorized to make that decision. Do you want to focus on getting profits up, or do you want to focus on acquiring market share and growing? And based on that, all strategy is laid out from that. You're also the only person who can decide the risk tolerance. Like, do you want to run a very conservative company where maybe growth is slower but profits are assured? Or are you okay with people taking risk and going out there and spending money and taking shots and trying to grow the company without you? And you have to be really clear on what needs to come through you as the CEO and founder and what doesn't. And then the last piece of that math equation is incentive plans. So how do you pay your salespeople? How do you pay your people charging revenue? Do they get bonuses? What are the benefits? Because incentives are one of the most powerful tools to drive behaviors. So you really have to think a lot about that. And early in my career, I did not appreciate that. But now I've come to, as I've lost span of control, I realize sometimes the only control I have is how I pay people, what I incent them to do in their own interest. And you have to think deeply about the second and third order effects of any of those kind of decisions. So those are the 6 things that I basically spend all of my time doing. And those are the biggest challenges that I face personally.
That's a great set. I feel like we could talk about each of these for the duration of the podcast. But I do have a couple areas I want to delve into a bit more.
Okay.
You talked about brand equity, and I think that you have kind of a great brand and kind of do a lot to put your thought leadership out there. And I would say probably more than what I see for kind of the average kind of cybersecurity kind of CEO and founder of a company of your size. So wanted to hear a little bit like what comes naturally to you in that versus what have you kind of learned or kind of pushed yourself to do? What kind of support do you get from your marketing team? Like talk a little bit about
Yeah.
you do that.
So we do have, well, I've come to understand that what we do is founder-led marketing, at least in part. And that's where a CEO or a founder, talks to the world and tells them about their company. And that's a big part of their strategy. I didn't know that that was a thing until someone introduced me to that term. I just realized it was something that we were kind of doing. Some of the things come natural to me. So, for example, writing comes very natural to me. So, risk360.com was actually a blog before it was a company. It was a way I was teaching myself cybersecurity concepts. So, I started a blog and started writing about it. I've always enjoyed writing. I wrote a book. So, like that piece of it comes fairly natural to me for whatever reason. It's just a source of joy. Uh, a good morning for me is a cup of coffee and like just doing some reflection and some writing. So it wasn't a huge gap for me to turn that reflection into LinkedIn post or whatever it might be, or a white paper, that kind of thing. So that piece came very naturally. The unnatural part of it is like public speaking. I've always had, I think more than an average fear of public speaking, but I felt it was important for me to get over that and to be able to communicate, period, to my internal team, but also to the outside world. I wrestled through high school and college, and one of the unique dynamics of wrestling is that you're the only one on the mat. It's you and another guy, and you're both in singlets, and you might lose in front of everyone. So I think that kind of gave me a little bit of background to be comfortable, like in the spotlight, if you will, or at least owning the consequences immediately of what happens. So I tried to become a great speaker. I did a stand-up comedy course last year that was like groundbreaking for me. Like anything after that is easy. And I've done hundreds of talks and podcasts. So like if anything, like this is as good as I am now, but this is the result of hundreds of talks. So you can imagine how not good it would be otherwise. But I just wanted to be a really good communicator. So that was absolutely learned and earned through a lot of work. And then just along the way, we've gotten like a few wins. Like at a certain point, our sales team started saying, "Oh yeah, they saw your LinkedIn post," or "This guy saw you at a talk," and we started hearing that enough, and completely on accident. Like I wish I could say it was like part of our strategy to do this, but we were just out there, and people started mentioning that they saw the things that I was producing, and it was resulting in opportunities and revenue. And I think I was lucky in the fact that I made the choice to be authentic and speak to a niche, stay in my lane. I don't talk about a lot of things. I talk about what I think I'm an expert in, and I talk about that regularly. And we've experienced some success. And then from there, we were just iterative. We just kept doing it and doing a little more. And then some of our practice leaders, Sawyer Miller, who's one of our audit and implementation practice leader, and Chris Donaldson, who's our managed programs and security consulting practice leader, and Corey Wolf, who is our offensive security practice leader. They also have really strong presence and what we call media properties at Risk 360, things that they focus on, doing video, doing it regularly, and they're excellent at it, and they also enjoy it. And it's just come to be kind of part of our core strategy is out teaching the competition, producing great content, or at least the best content that we can produce, hoping that we give back to the marketplace first and foremost to add value to our customers and to the marketplace. And then a small subset of those individuals will come back and decide to do business with us, and that's great, and we're grateful for it. And then our marketing team has helped operationalize that. So if it's a graphic to be created, if it's editing a video, if it is encouraging me because I'm feeling down, if it's logistics on an event, outreach, a certain amount of outreach for podcasts and event setup. So those types of things, they add a huge amount of value for. There was a time where I was doing all of that and it was consuming me. It was becoming untenable. I just couldn't keep it up. And now they've taken 90% of that burden off of me, and I just got to show up and speak from the heart and try to talk about what we do and tell everybody about Risk 360. So if for any CEO out there, maybe you're doing it on your own now, like you got to get help. I mean, that's the bottom line. Those admin tasks, it's more than admin. The strategy and the tactics behind getting it done is essential. And I would just say put yourself out there. I think people should. I think it's, especially for a smaller business, I think it's kind of essential for the people to be out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. I think there's a lot of value in what you just said. I think it is one of those things that can be a bit harder to measure, especially at the outset. It's not kind of a one-to-one of exactly kind of what you put in and what you get out right away.
Yeah.
But you do kind of that flywheel, and then you start to see it. And you just gave those examples of like, hey, I heard you on this talk, or I saw you here. I'm seeing you guys everywhere, right? And it's the sum of all of those individual efforts coming together.
Yeah. I mean, that's an important, what you just said is very important. So there was never like a point where all of a sudden I was like, I've arrived. Like, oh, we're getting business from this. I should keep doing it. It wasn't like that. I basically made a commitment. I think it was 2021. And I was like, I'm going to do this for a year, like no matter what. Like sustain. One of my philosophies is that pretty much anything worthwhile comes from sustained discipline over time. Like you just got to put in the work and you got to do it consistently at a consistently high quality for a long time for it to work out. That's business, that's relationships. So I was like, if I'm gonna go out there and try to build this brand for the company, I need to just commit and don't take score for like a year. Make some improvements along the way, but like do this thing. And I just did it for that year. And then along the way, we started seeing these little glimmers of success. And I would say it is working. Maybe there's better ways to do it, but it really was about just sustained discipline over time, committing to a process and making it form into a habit. So don't expect immediate results. Don't expect like some post or video to go viral and business to just come pouring out of the sky. It's really about like shots on goal, just putting a lot of shots up, and over time things start to work out.
Right, right. It'd be nice if there was one silver bullet, but the reality is it takes time and hard work and
That's
persistence.
the reality.
Yeah, yeah. So, Christian, I love everything that you're sharing. I think it's super helpful, and I'd love to hear a bit more. Kind of, who are you? Kind of under the covers. So, can you talk a little bit about your childhood? Like, how did you get to where you are? Did you know you wanted to kind of run a business someday?
Yeah. In some ways, I think I'm just kind of lucky to be here. Um, not alive, but lucky to be here as a business owner. Grew up super humble. Neither one of my parents even graduated high school. So my dad was kind of a guy who did odds and end jobs. Like he never had a real job, like quote unquote real job. He was like he would do like construction, lawn maintenance, all sorts of different things. My mom was actually paralyzed from the waist down in a car accident before I was born, so she stayed at home. She was healthy, she's happy, but so I grew up with that being normal. But she stayed at home with me as a stay at home mom. Is and was a great mom. So, I had like very little expectations in terms of like what I was going to do in life. But I did have some natural ambition. Like I wanted to do something. Early on, that mostly manifested itself in sports. I had some great mentors through football and through wrestling. Just got lucky. I got tied up in that ecosystem. And I was a pretty good student for whatever reason. I was just a good student. But I didn't really take college too seriously until I had a mentor, and this is a pattern for me. But I had a Spanish teacher who was a new teacher, has since went on to win Teacher of the Year several times. So it turns out he was a fantastic teacher. He found out that I got into the University of Georgia. I applied to 3 schools, all Georgia state schools, Georgia Tech, UGA, and KSU. Got into all of them, but I was going to go to like this local college just so I could commute into school. He found out I got into the University of Georgia, which here in Georgia is considered a pretty good school. And he looked at me and he said, "If you don't go to UGA, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life." And I had never even stepped foot on a college campus until that, like, ever. So I was like, I guess I'm going to UGA. I got to move out of the house now. I got to drive 2 hours because that's how far it was from my house. And that's a lot different than commuting from school. But I did that. That changed my life. It forced me to like go out on my own. I had another teacher that became a mentor. He got me into management information systems. I knew I wanted to do business, and so I followed his advice. Did management information systems. Went on to a big consulting company with about 50,000 employees right after college. Somehow stumbled into cybersecurity because someone told me I should. They were like, It's really interesting. These are fun projects." I listened, thought that was a great opportunity. It was an emerging industry. I got excellent opportunities at that company to do sales, to help with create delivery processes. But I always did want to start a business. My wife told me when I started Risk 360, like she was so happy to hear it because she was just tired of hearing about me dreaming of starting a business. But I was very risk averse. I was afraid to take that leap and start a business. But I had a mentor that was like another mentor that told me, "You should get your MBA." And I was like, "All right, maybe I should get my MBA." I listened to them, went to Georgia Tech, got my MBA, and this is where it all comes together. First day of my MBA class, there was another gentleman sitting in there with name tag, also named Christian. My name's Christian. His name is Christian. Easy icebreaker. I sat next to Christian White, who's my co-founder and business partner, and we spent the next 2 years together. It turned out he was there to start a business. He was a West Point graduate, transitioning out of the Army as an Army officer. I was at a big consulting firm thinking about starting a business, and that created the time. That serendipitous opportunity created the space for us to think about starting a business for 2 years. And then before the MBA program was even over, I didn't accept a partnership opportunity at the big consulting firm, left to start Risk 360 with one client that was worth $30,000, which was enough to pay the bills for a few months. And then I can't tell you how it happened, but we accumulated clients and figured it out and didn't quit. And it's been almost 10 years now and like built a great business. So like that's the quick, maybe that's the long story. That's the long version, but I chalk up most of the success that I've had to great mentors along the way, not quitting, and then just like lots of incremental improvements along the way.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you attribute so many kind of key milestones to the mentors, but then it's really you, right, who took the action and did something with that.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I'm curious, like, are there any transformations you would say that you've gone through personally that you want to speak about?
yeah, I think absolutely. So I think one of the outcomes of the way I grew up was out of self-preservation. I think I became a person in my early 20s that was very selfish, very me focused. And I don't mean that in the terms of like I was a bad person or anything. It was just like out of necessity and out of survival mode, I needed to focus on myself to get myself in a healthy position. And I got success out of that. So I clung on to that for a long time, and I think that could have become very negative, to be overly selfish, because what I've part of the transformation and what I have discovered as a leader and as a business owner is that you have to care about other people. And the inflection point for me was two things happened in my life at the same time. I had my first child, who's now 10, and started a business. So that forced my hand into focusing mostly about myself to almost 100% of my energy being focused on my family, on my team members, and my customers. And I didn't realize it at the time, but like along the way, I kind of realized how important that was to my success, but also to me just becoming a different type of person that cares about other people, that wants to take care of people. And I think that's an important leadership thing. I think like all the best leaders that I've ever worked for, even if they even if you think they're jerks and they're stern people, they're hard folks to work with, like the best leaders truly care about other people. They care about their customers, they care about their team members. And that kind of unlocks some special potential that lets people grow something because people want to be part of something where they're taken care of, I think ultimately, whether that's a customer or your team members. And I think without that inflection point for me personally, like Risk 360 never would have become a thing. It never would have been able to grow to what it is now. And through caring about other people and our customers, it has been able to grow. And I think any future growth or scale that we're going to get from here, it'll be about focusing on what's in it for our team members, what's in it for our stakeholders, what's in it for our customers. And that's kind of the key to unlocking growth that was lucky for me, a small inflection point along the way.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. I can certainly empathize with that. My son was born 2 years after I started the business, and
Nice.
certainly kind of changed a lot of things, changed the dynamic of like where your time can go, how much time can go to different places, and kind of how you work with the people around us. So I can definitely
Absolutely.
empathize. Um, I'm curious, Christian. You've talked a little bit about, alluded to some of the work that your company does and kind of the work you do with clients. Could you talk a little bit about that more explicitly? And I know there's a lot happening in the cybersecurity space. So, like, what kind of transformations are your clients going through? And how do you work with them on that?
Yeah, so just a bit of context for folks that might not be familiar with like the cybersecurity ecosystem. There's a couple like macro dynamics happening. I'll go through them quickly. Like one thing is there's more data that has been created than ever before. We're kind of all experiencing that. But the mass digitization is just incredible. To put it into a bit of context, there's been more data created in the last couple of years than all of human history. If I were to write on a piece of paper front and back in 12-point font and start stacking them, that stack would go to the nearest galaxy. There's just an incredible amount of data. So more data means that there's more stuff to protect and there's more stuff to steal. In tandem, the other thing that's happening is that cybercrime is outpacing the criminal drug industry. If it was an economy, it would be a third behind the US and China. So there's just an astronomical amount of money to be made in cybercrime. And the third macro trend is that companies are no longer vertically integrated. All companies are pretty much relying on other companies to do business. You're outsourcing your payroll, you're outsourcing professional services, you're using SaaS platforms, so on and so forth. So it's not just about your security, it's about the security of your partners. So that environment has made cybersecurity a really important thing in our economy. And one of the results when something becomes important is that it becomes regulated and a lot of compliance follows behind that. Either business to business compliance, like in the form of things like SOC 2 reports or ISO 27001, where you have to get these security certifications, or literally regulations issued by the government. And the thing that Risk 360 does in that ecosystem is we tend to help enterprise clients that have extremely high burdens and an extremely complex environment when it comes to the compliance and regulatory space. Most of our customers have, 3 to 10 different regulatory and compliance frameworks that they have to navigate. They have multiple business units. They have multiple products that all have their own nuanced regulatory and compliance burden. And that means they need policies. They get external audits. There's all these processes that they have to stand up. And not only do they have to stand up those processes, they have to evidence that they're actually operating to maintain compliance. And historically, folks were doing this out of Excel spreadsheets. They were collaborating with auditors through a shared file where they're providing the evidence. And what we did is we built a team and a platform that helped harmonize all of that and make it really simple, because most of these frameworks aren't that different. There's a lot of overlap between the requirements, and we've made it very efficient. So, for example, we've recently helped one company who was spending about $4 million on compliance reduce it to about $2 million. So that's a 50% cost reduction. And that's very common. So usually we're helping organizations cut costs by up to 50% or more, save millions of dollars, and ironically do better, like build a better program while significantly reducing cost and having better cybersecurity. That's kind of the outcome that we produce through people, our playbooks, and our platform, full circle. So that's kind of where we live at in the ecosystem, if that makes sense. Hopefully I described that in a way people can consume.
Yeah, I think you did. And I think just talking about those three industry trends, I think spot on, and I think will resonate with any business person, right? Even those that are outside of the space.
Yeah.
Love to ask you, Christian, before we wrap up, knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given your younger self the first time you were in a leadership role?
I don't think I would offer any advice. And not to be contrarian, I don't think I would offer advice. I think I would probably just offer encouragement. Because most of the stuff that I've learned along the way really, I think, had to be learned through experience, because there's a difference between knowing something in your head and knowing something in your heart. So I don't think any advice would have landed. It really had to be learned through experience. But I do know along the way, I was discouraged at times. I was questioning. I was stressed. And maybe if someone could have just come along the way and said, man, you're on the right path. Don't be afraid to run through that wall. Go 100%. That would have been so meaningful to me. And when I'm coaching my other leaders, I kind of see the same thing. Maybe I can give them little tidbits of advice here and there. But really what they're looking for is don't let them run off the cliff, and offer them a lot of encouragement. So that's probably what I would do. And that'd probably be my advice to myself now for my other leaders.
For your future self too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful place to wrap. I love that. It's very genuine and resonates. So can you let us know, if someone wants to reach you, how can people find you?
Yep. Best place to find me, I post almost every day, is LinkedIn. So if you just look up Christian Hyatt on LinkedIn, you'll find me. And if you want to check out our company, because we have lots of videos, you can check out our culture. We're pretty transparent. You can go to risk360.com. That's risk, the number 3, and then SIXTY.com and learn all about us.
Yeah, great. And I would really encourage the listeners to do that. I checked out a lot of your materials, and it really is impressive, all the stuff that you guys have put together. So, and thank you for this conversation. I really appreciate having you on the show.
My pleasure. Awesome.
Yeah, great to have you. And thank you to everyone listening. I know I really loved hearing about so much of what Christian shared, like how he, built and implemented his problem-solving framework that they have in the organization, the lessons learned from the SaaS product launch and becoming a tech-enabled services company, your evolution and kind of role and focus as a CEO. And so to the listeners, if today's episode gave you valuable insights, and I am pretty darn sure that it did, please share it with someone. Spreading this kind of knowledge and information is really what helps all of us grow as leaders and really equips us to drive successful transformation and innovation in our organizations. So thanks again, Christian. And this has been another great episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time.
That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.